Alright, so it's time for a little vlog in the car. I had some extra time on the road, so I figured it would be a good time to talk about something. And the topic of today is going to be things you should consider when you get some aftermarket wheels. So as many of you guys know, if you watch my channel at all, I do have aftermarket wheels on my car, which are actually the first set of aftermarket wheels I've ever put on any car at all that I've ever owned. So that was a really exciting time for me. But there are a few things that I've learned that you should look out for before getting wheels, and things you should consider just thinking about and kind of doing some numbers as well before you actually get the wheels themselves. So just some background, if you didn't already know, my stock wheels were 18s, and they were nice. They were the M Sport wheels, the 193s, if you're familiar with the BMW wheels. They were nice, kind of, I think people called them like the spider web type of wheels, so because they kind of looked like them in a way. So they were nice, and I did like them a lot. I was glad I bought the car with them, but I really wanted something that did look aftermarket but matched the car. So I went with the color gunmetal because I felt that black wheels really, they were hard to see in pictures on a white car. They just kind of looked like a dark space. It's very hard to capture. You have to change the lighting a lot, it seems like. So, but that's not the only reason. I just felt that like everybody kind of goes for that stormtrooper look or something. It just seemed like it's very, very popular to do black wheels on a white car, which I do really like. But I went with gunmetal just because it was kind of an in-between, and I just really wanted it. So as far as the color goes, that's something to consider. Also, if you're going with a colored wheel like white, I mean, that's a pretty serious commitment as far as cleaning goes. And looks too, that it's much harder to execute a good white wheel, I feel like, regardless of the color of your car. But that's kind of, I like to stick to the basics: black, white, gunmetal, the regular traditional colors that you'll see. So that's the color. That's my thought on why I got the color. And as far as how big they are, I went from 18s to 19s. I definitely don't want to go any bigger than 19 on this car, just because of fitment and look. I've seen some 20s on 335s, and they do not look right to me. Just unnecessary how big it is. So unless you're kind of going for that donk look on your car, 20s not on this car. Maybe if it's a bigger car, maybe like an M3. I think those have 20s, depending. The whole body size, it's just going to depend. So that's going to factor into your choice, at least I would hope so. And as far as how wide, these wheels, they're 8.5 and then 9.5 in the back. And before, I think I had 8 and 9, I believe the 193s were. So I went a little wider, and then the offset was very similar. I think now I have it's in the mid 30s. It's like 33 and 34, 36, which is much higher than I had expected, but it's not that different. And you also want to consider the offset, and that's going to be that number that says ET whatever. So mine is ET33 for the front, I think. So if someone asks, that's your offset. So you definitely want to consider that, especially with spacers and how wide the tires. So you want to do your measurements, go in the forums and figure that out. So there's a lot that actually goes into it to make sure it's right, because if you decide on a pair of wheels and it doesn't fit right, either you're going to have to return them or have spacers, and spacers are fine, but I actually don't need spacers because my fitment is perfectly flush. There's no way, unless I did some serious fender rolling, that I would need spacers at all, which is great. One less thing to buy. And lastly, I want to talk about tires. If you go from 18 to 19, so the wheel is actually bigger, the thickness, not the thickness, but the profile of the tire, you'll want to go, a step or two down depending on how much you change, which will have an effect or not have an effect on your speedometer and the miles and all that. You don't want to go from a 15 to a 20 and have the same profile tires if you can help it. So that's going to make a big difference as far as your odometer and your speedometer, everything. You don't want to be showing racking up the miles because the wheel is all messed up as far as sizing goes. So I believe that my fronts are 35. They're the 35 is the profile, and then the rears are 30, and that calculates to about within 2%. I calculated. I used an online tool. There's like a calculation tool that you can put in the size of your tires and the size of your wheels, and then the new ones that you want, and it'll tell you exactly what difference it'll make as far as on a percentage goes, which then you can then calculate, like, if you drive 10,000 miles a year and mine's off by 2%, that's not a lot of miles that are off. So that's definitely doable. I'm not sure if there's like kind of a rule, like people would say, under 5 or 10%, you're probably fine. It just depends. But I definitely want that right without adjusting any of the electronics. I didn't even dig into that. I want to make sure that the setup itself was right, as opposed to adjusting everything else afterwards if I got a different set of wheel later or whatever. So you want to definitely be mindful of that as well. You don't want to be screwing with the odometer and all that good stuff with the messed up sizes. So and really, I would say the last thing is you're going to want to think about what you're using them for. Like, I wanted a little bit bigger, so it kind of filled out more of the wheel arches, and I felt that 19s would be perfect on this car. 20s were too big, and 18s were fine. I was fine with 18s. 19 squared would be okay too, so you could rotate them, but mine are staggered, as I said, 8.5, 9.5, and before they were staggered too. So I was used to the staggered setup. It is kind of a pain in the ass because you're just replacing the rear tires all the time in this car, especially. So that's something to think about. And as far as usability, like I said, I live in Ohio. There's potholes, there's bad roads. You want to think about what you're using them for, and if you're driving in areas where you're going to be mindful of the roads. If you live in an area where it's just long and flat, there's nothing much around, maybe you don't have winter, go with whatever. That's not really a factor. But if you're driving in areas that have potholes and you have to worry, I mean, that's something to consider. So that's something that I'm a little bit not regretful, but I wish I would have dug in a little deeper so I was more prepared, because I wasn't really prepared for the ride. It's a harsher ride. I almost pretty much have rubber bands as tires. Might as well be rubber bands because they're very, very thin. Maybe you can, I think 30 and then it's 25 is the maybe the lowest. I'm not exactly sure. I could be wrong on that one, but definitely want to be careful about that. I know there's a couple people who live up north on YouTube, and they mentioned they want squared 18s, and then they have the profile of the tires just slightly more than mine, which makes a big enough difference that it makes it a little bit nicer to ride on. Especially being worried about potholes. I don't want to crack a rim every time I drive over a stupid bump. It's a pain in the butt. And the last thing I actually almost forgot to mention is the width of the tire. I have 235s in the front, and I used to have 225s. So that's not a huge difference, but I don't want to have fat tires in the front because then it's just too heavy, and the handling, I'm not tracking it. It's just unnecessary. And then in the back, I had 255s, and I jumped up to 275s, which do rub, which I mentioned in other videos. It does rub when I'm on the highway like I'm at now, 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, and there's like a bridge, and I kind of go over the undulation, and it goes. You've probably heard it in other videos if you've watched my channel long enough, but that is definitely something to think about. So you also want to, like I said, you definitely want to pay attention to the width of the tire. I have to roll my rear fenders just because, as time passes, I realize that I hate the rubbing, but I really do like the 275s. I think I'm going to stick with them. A lot of guys with this car have 265s, and I think their golden is perfect. It doesn't rub. I can't imagine that it would. But you want to think about that, and also like the turning radius in the front. I didn't go much more aggressive than I had before, so I can do full turn either way, and there's no problem at all. I don't see myself having an issue in the future or changing or anything like that. So this thing, that's gonna be it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this little vlog and my thoughts on considering know, different things when you're buying new wheels. Do a little spreadsheet, do some calculations. There's plenty of tools out there that can help you, and there's plenty of people that can help you. Hopefully I helped you. So that's it. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Hello, hello, hello. Why is it? It's Siri. Siri thinks I'm freaking talking to her.
No, leave me alone.
Turn Siri. Literally, I will murder Siri.